for coming. Jenny asked if I would just jump right in. So I'll start by thanking you so much, Jenny, for having me, inviting me to your beautiful school. It's such a pleasure, and I got to do a little workshop today with the teachers, which was wonderful, and I got to observe in the classrooms a bit, and it was really special to see your children. It's a beautiful community. I'm so glad to be here. I'd love to hear first from you, just a show of hands. Who of you are very new to the school? You've been here for a short time. Okay, great, okay. And how many of you have very young children, the youngest ones? Okay. And how many of you have primary age children, the 3 to 6 year olds? Okay, a lot of people. And how many of you have children in the elementary? Okay, great. And is there anyone here who's a complete visitor who's not had any children here yet at all? Okay, great. Thank you. It's always just nice to get a little lay of the land. I have been working in Montessori for about 30 years. The school where I worked was founded by my mother and my sister in 1982, Forest Bluff School in Illinois. And I went there after college, after getting my Montessori training. I went and became a teacher there. I taught primary age, I taught elementary age, and then eventually became the head of school. So I have the training from the youngest ages all the way up through adolescence, and was head of school for 15 years there. So really got to spend a lot of time working with teachers in classrooms with children of all ages and talking a lot with parents, and found that that is very rewarding. I love helping people to understand Montessori better, and ended up writing this book, which you can buy tonight. I hope you will, because it will help you to understand Montessori better. It will give you a book that you can hand to other people, neighbors, relatives, and so on, to help them understand Montessori better, and really help to spread how special and how powerful this way of learning is, so that more children can have it in more ways. So I hope you'll get a lot out of it. It's got lots of stories and humor and fun, and tried to make it engaging for you. So please get a couple copies tonight. When you do, you're supporting your school because they get some of the proceeds. So I will jump right in and then answer questions at the end. So we're going to talk tonight about Montessori's potential for your children. And these are some graduates, some of them who I taught over the years when they were very, very small. And over the years, I've just seen one after another, very, very different from each other, turn out to be these really amazing young adults. Some of them have been in the service, some of them have gone into finance, some of them have started their own companies. They're just each completely uniquely themselves. And as I kept watching one story after another, I started to realize there has got to be something about Montessori that's different, that every single one of these children, because I know they struggled, and I know what their learning issues were, and I watched them, struggle with social issues and all kinds of things when they were growing up. But somehow through Montessori, they were able to build themselves into these outstanding, incredible, unique people, really become their best selves, really reach their potential. And so I started to really look at this. What is happening in Montessori that's different? So I'm going to take you on this journey, starting at the very beginning. When we think about your child, what your child or any child needs to know to survive and thrive in an uncertain world. We don't know what's going to happen, right? It's become so much more uncertain in our immediate lives. And we don't really know what subjects this child will need to know. We don't know what languages are going to be most helpful for her to learn, do we? We don't know what jobs we should be training her for. Because by the time she grows up, it's all going to be different, right? So what do we do? How do we help this young person? And that leads us to the question of what should school be? What should the role of school be to help this child develop herself and build herself into a capable adult. Well, we do know that every child will need certain abilities. Every child's going to need to be able to solve problems. They're going to need to be able to think creatively. They're going to need to be able to innovate. They're going to need to be able to persevere with confidence even after their failures. They're going to need to empathize with other people, try to understand people on the other side of the world, people they've never met, people who have completely different customs, empathize with them and work together with people. We know that that's important. Ultimately, this child will need to be able to be adaptable and be able to adapt and adjust to changing times, because the world will always be changing. That's the one thing that we can count on. If we can help every young person to be adaptable and to form themselves in these abilities, we know that whatever happens, they are going to be able to survive and thrive and do well. And this is what happens in Montessori. So how many of you went to a school that looked something like this? Okay, right, most of us did. And so we then have to think, okay, how are schools helping children to prepare themselves for an uncertain world? What's happening in this picture? We have the source of knowledge is the teacher, right, at the front of the room, or perhaps partly also a textbook or a tablet. But the information is abstract. The child can't even see where it is, right? It's in that person's head, or it's inside a book. It's somewhere tucked away. They're supposed to sit still and listen and look with their eyes. So 2 senses, looking and listening. And we know that everybody hears things a little differently and everyone sees things a little differently. So we're putting a lot of pressure on 2 senses through which this child is supposed to get all this information from one person at the front of the room. Everyone's going to do it at the same pace, no matter what learning style they have, in the same way, at the same time, with everybody else of the same age. And then as soon as that topic is over, we're going to move on to the next one, right? And that's only going to happen for about a year, or maybe for 50 minutes, then you move to another teacher and do it over again. So all of this broken up. So you think, how is that going to help this child to really prepare themselves and do what they need to do to think creatively and so on? The list we just saw, right? Well, in a way, what we're doing in conventional schools is we're saying what is happening in this cartoon, and I love to be able to laugh, right? Get some humor out. So he's saying to the cat, never, ever think outside the box. Outside the litter box, right? And in so many ways, that's what we're doing to our children in conventional school. We're telling them, conform to what everybody else is doing, compete with each other for grades and scores and prizes, follow the commands, don't move or have an idea of your own or a different answer than the answer that we need to hear. Avoid failures because they're quite painful. You're going to get grades and you're going to be punished in some way, held back, not able to go with your friends, humiliated, and stick with the program. Others are going to think and act for you. The teacher is thinking for you and acting for you. This is completely the opposite of what we need to do to help our children prepare themselves for the kind of world that they're going to be living in, right? So over 150 years ago, this woman, Maria Montessori, saw the same problems that we just explored just now. It was happening then, and it's still happening now. And she saw that the reasons that this program that conventional school has set up does not work for so many human children is that it's not based in human development. It's not the way that human beings learn. We don't learn by just sitting and listening and looking. You can do it pretty well because you're adults and you've developed yourselves, but it is very, very difficult for a child to sit and listen and learn in a traditional format. And for so many of them, it's not even working very well, right? So this is why Maria Montessori noticed, this is my daughter actually, when she was a little over around a year old. The child is active, right? Your children don't sit still. The infant doesn't learn to speak and to walk by being strapped into something and you telling them and showing them on a screen, right? They learn to speak and to walk by moving and exploring and engaging with the environment and grabbing things and engaging. The child is active, they explore, and that is how they learn. Every human being, this is how they learn. So if we take that into consideration and we realize we want to help this child in this journey, school's going to look a lot more like this. This is a Montessori primary classroom. Where is the knowledge? Out on the shelves. All the information is out on the shelves. They can see it. They can engage with it. They can understand it. They can see how things are related to each other. They can see the order of things. You've got all the subjects out at once because you don't know what each child is going to be interested in, right? So we have to have our geography and our geometry and our botany and all of these subjects out at once, and they are seeing then the connections between these subjects. By having it out physically, their brains can start to pull in and understand the connections between all of these topics and understand, really, this is the real world. This is how it works. These children are doing a dynamic subtraction problem here with their teacher. She's distributing to them from 9,999, which they have brought over in these physical materials. They each have a different number that they have brought over, and they are each getting the number that they're asking for, and then they're going to see at the end what the answer is. So there's a lot of movement, physical movement. The children picked up those trays and walked all the way across the room and got that number and held that number in their minds when they went all the way across the room to count out how many thousands they needed, how many hundreds. You see how their whole body and mind is involved in this math problem. And they're interacting with each other, and they're counting it out together. It's so much fun. It's so exciting. And you can see why they would want to do it again and again and again and again. Eventually, they're writing it on paper. When they see it on paper, they know exactly what's happening. They know that 1,000 is like this, and a unit is like that, and the dimensions, the differences between them. So they're soaking in so much by learning this way instead of a textbook with these random, very, very abstract numbers that are amounts that they can't quite get a hold of. Here it is physically. We've got an older child who already knows how to do this, who is doing something else. He's reviewing, he's learning his equations and he's memorizing them with this board and he's writing them all down. But he's getting a review of what's happening in front of him. So think of that. And then we have a little 3-year-old who's doing something completely different over here on this table. He's getting a preview. So he's hearing them count. So imagine the preview, the actual experiences, and then the review. Over and over and over and over for 3 years, these things are happening to them. So that's a really, really full, rich, complete learning experience for them, right? So 3 things really help to make this work in Montessori. Here's a little formula for you. First, we have the prepared environment. So we prepare this environment that has all this information on the shelves, all these materials where we're going to show children these abstract concepts with concrete materials that they can explore with. We have a prepared adult who is going to prepare and maintain that environment for them, who's going to link the child to the environment. So right here, this teacher is showing a little 18-month-old how to peel a zucchini. And she actually even has her hands on top of his hands and she's guiding him. So she's linking him very directly to this. And then he's going to do it by himself. She's going to take her hands away as soon as he's got the idea. And she's going to model behavior. So that adult is trained in Montessori of how we walk and how we talk and how we show children these customs that we have. And the third part of the formula is freedom and responsibility, because those first two things are wonderful, but they won't go very far if we don't give the children choices and boundaries. And I say at home and at school. So we think of choices we give our children and the boundaries. And between those two, independence and responsibility grows for our children. So this young man is writing in his journal. He's in elementary school now, elementary level, and he is writing down what time it is, what he's going to do, and then what time he finished it, and then he writes down the next thing he's going to do. So he's making a log of his day, and that gives him the ability to start managing his time and gives the teacher a tool where she can help him look at what he's been doing and say, you've done a lot of math in the last 3 days. I can see how much you're enjoying that, but it's so important that you also work on some of the grammar that I showed you and work on that report that you've been doing. So they start to understand how to manage their time, and they realize, oh, I spent 3 hours on this. Maybe now it's time to move on to something else. So you see how that starts to happen? And it happens at an age where they're really open to it. They're really fascinated by time and everything that's happening around them. So he's able to be responsible and have a lot of experience with time management starting from age 6. So this is this formula. Every person, you can understand Montessori in a nutshell this way if you think about it. Every person's forming themselves. The child forms themselves. We don't mold them. We don't form them. They form themselves. And if they are, they need a prepared environment, an adult, and freedom and responsibilities at home and at school. And what results from this formula and this way of teaching the children are certain character traits that help them to think creatively and innovate and empathize and all those things we talked about, which are our goals. So here are what some of these traits are. This is what I see in those graduates. Over and over and over, I kept seeing the same thing. So I started to put that list together. Montessori children engage, they focus, they organize, they're curious, they collaborate, they're courageous, respectful, and resourceful. There are other characteristics that all of you can think of that you see in your children, but these are some core, these are 8 core characteristics, and I'm going to go through for you just really briefly, kind of help you connect why those things are happening, where those things are happening in Montessori. Okay, our children engage with the world around them because from the time they were little, and this is an elementary classroom, but from the time they were little, when they came into a Montessori school, they were invited to come right over to the shelf and start working. When you go to a conventional school, you walk in the room and you have to sit down and you wait for the teacher to tell you what to do and to organize the activity. But in Montessori, you're invited to roll up your sleeves and go right at something. So these children come in the room in elementary, and the first thing they do is they get their workout. Some of them even have an idea in the car of what they know they want to work on that day. And they're so excited, and everyone's got something different out, and they're all working at the same time. And for one child to walk across the room to get something, he's going to pass geography, botany, geometry, a math problem, somebody learning a language maybe, somebody composing music on the bells or the tone bars. This very, very rich intellectual workroom. So he's going to pick up on all these things. It's like exponential learning that happens. You can cover so much more when you're in this kind of environment than if you're taken by lockstep through a curriculum with everybody else at the same time, regardless of whether you're ready to move ahead or you're struggling with something. This is like living in the real world, right? And so what I see is that these children become people who are so interested in things. I was just with our 22-year-old son. He's on spring break, and so he was with me for a couple days. Now he's taking care of the dogs so that I could come do this with you. And walking down the street with him last night, walking the dogs, he was talking about all kinds of things, how dolphins communicate, and did you know this? And then about the last 10 rocket launches, and he talked about what went wrong in each one of them, and then AI, and just his mind, he's so interested in everything. I was like, that's so much from Montessori, and that's where you get that innovative approach to life. You're able to draw on all these connections because you're able to see in these connections because this is what you grew up in, right? So it makes them so fascinated with the outside world. They really focus, and they do that because we're giving them activities that are challenging, just right for that age. So this is a 2-year-old, maybe even younger, and to get the thread through that needle, the eye of that needle, is really, really hard to do for him. So you can see his whole body is focused on that. So we have this focus, this concentration, this flow experience over and over and over and over in Montessori. It really helps them to learn to focus. They have to organize. Every time they take a material off the shelf, they've got to figure out, and I watched this today in the toddler room, child took out the material and put it on the floor and then realized they didn't have a little mat and looked up at the teacher and looked at the work and then put the work back on the shelf and went over and got a mat and came and put it down and went back and got it. But think about, for a 2-year-old, how much organizing that is. Like, oh, this comes before that. What they're going through, how they're building their minds and that ability to think. So they have to organize every single time they do something. It's constant exercise of their minds. These 8-year-olds are doing a math problem. This is called the racks and tubes, and it is a big division problem by a 2-digit number up into the millions. Okay, so if they don't do it in the right order, or if they don't have the right numbers, I saw that today in the classroom where teacher was pointing out, okay, does this number match how many beads are in each of those bowls in the right order? And they went, no! Right away they could see their mistake. So they can find their mistakes because the material is physical, and they do that over and over and over. So where's the fear of failure? You can find that it's okay to make mistakes because you learn from them, and nobody came over and punished you for that, and it wasn't embarrassing. You just, oh, right, okay. Now we've got to go back and do it again. And then they want to do it again and again and again because it was hard, so it's really interesting and it's really fun because they're together. So imagine if you got to do math this way, how fun this would be. But all the organizing that happens. This I wanted to just say is a middle school student, Montessori middle school student, getting ready to go on a camping trip. And sometimes with your children, you won't see their organization physically, but you'll see it mentally in the way that they organize their time. Other times you'll see it physically. Sometimes you'll see something like this example is where this child's bedroom was like a bomb went off. It was really, really messy. But this 12-year-old was able to organize himself this way to get ready for a trip that had nothing to do with the parents, nothing to do with them at all. So, and this always cracks me up. I like to tell people the book that he chose to bring with him was Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. Wow. Because they love to challenge themselves. Wow. And, he wasn't going to be upset if he only read some of it, because no one told him to do it. But he decided he was interested, and why not? Why not pull something off the shelf? And they said I should bring a book. So just love that. That's what your children are going to be like. Curious. They are very curious, and they're able to follow their curiosity and their interests and their passions. The teacher is able to say, you're interested in sharks? Great! You can do a chart on sharks. And so they're writing, reading in books, writing the information out, editing that work with their teacher, drawing the parts of the shark, and they literally have their heads together. I love that in this picture. They're literally putting their heads together, and sometimes that means arguing with each other and who's going to get to draw the shark and things like that. But working that out is helping them to develop those skills. And their curiosity, instead of dying off a little bit each year, as people constantly tell you what you have to do before you're allowed to do what you're interested in, their curiosity drives their education. They can do more and more and more and more and go further and further. So that curiosity grows instead of diminishes. They collaborate, and they've been doing that from the time they were young. These elementary Montessori materials are designed to force collaboration to happen. The children have to collaborate with each other in order to get the answer and to work with these materials. So these are 7-year-old girls, and they are 7 or 8 maybe. They are dividing fractions by fractions. You can see they have it on paper, but they're using this material to find the answers. So I just love that, and checking their answers together, collaborating with each other. They also become very courageous. These two children decided they wanted to write about fossils. They were really excited about fossils. They found all the information they could in books about fossils, and so then they asked if they could go to a museum to see fossils and find an expert to talk to. So they had to get on the phone, and they brought the phone into the classroom. I was teaching these two children at the time. They brought the phone in, and they called, and they asked, what time the museum was open, and they figured out how much money they were going to need, and they called different parents to ask for a chaperone and figured out how they were going to get there and planned the whole thing. And then they went to the museum with clipboards with questions they wrote. So nobody gave them some kind of worksheet to fill out or gave them, they made up their questions. And they had to go out of the classroom because they couldn't get the answers anywhere else. So we let them go out into the world and engage with the real world and find the answers to those questions. All right, these are adolescents on a work trip. I'm not going to talk much about that. These children really learn to respect each other, and that comes so much from the ways that we treat them in Montessori, but also just something as simple as the maps, thinking about people in other countries, learning to be curious and respectful of people who are different from you. These two children, she is quizzing him on the countries of Asia that he has memorized, and she's pointing to Bahrain, I think. And I just love the interaction here. You can just see the respect in her body language for him as he's guessing, and she's patiently waiting for him, and she'll help him if he needs it. But that respect that they gain for each other. They also learn that everybody learns differently, and they see that in each other, and there's no shame in that. So they're able to really help each other and be respectful as they're interacting with their work. Finally, the last trait is resourcefulness. Now, this was a 3-year-old who found that his teacher was busy and he needed his shoelace tied. So this is a really important picture that I love to explore with people a little bit. This is why we have one teacher for lots of children, because if an adult was available, he would have just gone over to one of them and had his shoelace tied, right? But because the adults weren't available, he has to think, how else can I solve my problem? And someday he's going to be trying to tie it himself. But right now, at age 3, he realizes, I could ask an older child. So he goes over to an older child, he looks out into the environment around him and says, where can I find the answer to my question? It's either in here or it might be out there, but it's not always going to be in some authority figure. It's going to be in some place that I can find. So he then goes over, and I just love it that the other child sits down and crosses his legs to help him tie his shoelace, and finds it really interesting to help him and to be the helper. It's a beautiful moment. Our children also learn to be resourceful with information. So here's a child wanting to write a report about the earth, and she's able to go to the library and figure out where to find that information and pull it in, put it into her own words. So our children in Montessori learn to be very, very resourceful. That's a really important trait for life. It has a lot to do with confidence and self-esteem and connection. So that resourcefulness is key. All right, so your child is building a brain that can think, engage in scientific inquiry, actively solve problems, because Montessori helps our children with these traits. And this boy is about 12, and he's in the upper elementary room. He's gone outside. He's taken basically garbage from around the school and has built this contraption, and he has a little marble or a little ball of some kind. This is follow-up work to a lesson he was given about gravity or something to that effect, and he was very interested to see what he could do with it. So he built this, and imagine the time that this took, the finessing of these little parts of this whole contraption to try to make that ball go just where you want it to. So here is the scientist at work. Here is, at just 12 years old, being able to create the science experiment yourself and find the answer. That is the child that we need for the future, right? This is the kind of person we want to help send into the world. So this is just a moment to say, so many times we look at our child and we think, well, that's all just so wonderful, but my child is not going to be able to do that. My child isn't going to choose work, or my child isn't going to be able to do this somehow. I don't know whether it's just happens to us as parents. I'm a parent too, and I think these things all the time. But it's really important that we look at our children and believe in them, and that they sense that from us. And Maria Montessori said over and over and over, follow the child, have faith in the child. And what I think she meant was have faith in this process that we just talked about, that children do build themselves. We can't mold them, and we can't control that process. But that process is there. And if we have faith that that natural ability to learn in whatever way is right for that unique child is at work. And our jobs is to provide that environment, set it up, support them as the adults, and give freedoms and boundaries. And from that formula, they are going to be able to do everything that they need to do to build themselves. So finally, I'm just going to wrap it up by saying there are 3 key things I really think about giving our children with Montessori. And the first is independence. I'm sure that there's something about this school that made you want to come here because you wanted your children to become independent. I think if you didn't, you probably wouldn't have been so interested in it, right? We know they need to be independent. This is actually our son when he went off to NYU, which happened at the height of COVID. So it was the fall of 2020, and a lot of colleges were closed. And NYU said, we will be open, but the students are going to be tested every few days for COVID, and they're going to have to stay in their dorms when they first come for 2 weeks and be quarantined, and these very strict rules. And he said he wanted to go anyway. And we live like in a suburb. I mean, we're not city people. He'd been to New York once, and he went by himself. He got on the airplane, he had a backpack and a little duffel bag, and off he went. Got an Uber when he got there, figured out how to get to the dorm that he had the address for, and started his life. And I love kind of visiting with this picture because the night before your child goes to college is too late to be hoping they're going to be independent. and they can handle life without you. It's too late. We're really, really in trouble if we're still shouting to them, and don't forget to do your laundry. We want to be helping them develop that independence from the time they were little, in little appropriate pieces, what's appropriate for that child, right? Okay, so independence we can give them, respect we can give them. This is our daughter when she was competing as a horseback rider. She was in a competition, and she prepared herself for the day. She got up really, really early in the morning in the dark, and in that backpack she made sure she had water, she made sure she had electrolytes, she planned out when she was going to eat, how much protein she was going to have so that she could perform that day, got the horses ready, got herself ready, thought through where she was going to need to be and what she was going to need to have with her. So for any of you who have children who are athletes, you really get to see this, that some parents try to do all of this for their children, and really we need to let them do it for themselves. Or if they're really love musical instrument, or there's something that they want to do, they need to be empowered. We need to give them the respect that they can do it for themselves. And the only way we can do that is by letting them do it for themselves. It's really, really important. We can give our children this respect. And finally, joy. We have to remember the joy in life. And right now we have so many concerns, so many worries about the future, worries about the planet, worries about politics, constant stress and anxiety that's coming into our lives, that phone that we live with all the time. And sometimes we need to step away from all of that and remember there's so much joy to be had. And you just look at your little child and they have that joy in them automatically. And we want to keep that growing. We want to keep that joy growing. This is a graduate from our school who's now in her late 20s, and she just ran a marathon. It was a personal goal that she had. And the joy on her face of having completed that. Life is hard. It's like a marathon. It's really hard. Everything that your child does that's really challenging and really hard for them is going to bring them joy when they complete it. And so we want to see them embrace in hard things and do the hard stuff. So when they come home and they tell you they're very upset because of something that happened at school, or they're having a struggle, or you see them going through something, remember this picture, and remember there's also so much joy to be had when we accomplish something, and we can share that joy with them and help them to see that. So that concludes my talk. I do hope that you'll dig into this book and everything I just talked about, a little bit peppered through there and more, and that you'll help me to spread this word to others, because to me it's not about selling a book, it's about helping other people to find this way of thinking, and that this is out there for people in all different places. And the more we can think this way, the better it's going to be for children everywhere, and the better it's going to be for our country and our world as these young adults go out into the world very well prepared for it. So thank you so much. I'm happy to answer questions and would love to hear any thoughts that you have. So the little one in the back, that's the most important clap I do. Still clapping. Yes. Yes.
I actually have a question.
Good.
So, to become a Montessori teacher, is the material as tempting as it is being a child? So is it
Yes.
so
amazing.
teaching?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I wasn't planning to be a Montessori teacher, and my sister talked me into it because she said, you'll get the education you never had in school, and you have nothing else to do. What else are we going to do? And I'm like, you're right, I don't know what I'm going to do. She said, at least you'll get a really good education. So I went and I took the elementary training, and I was amazed. I learned so much about botany and so much about math and so much that I hadn't really had or just didn't remember. And it went in so much more detail. But it was so much more tangible to learn it physically that way. And when we got to the math, which I had really struggled with in school, I literally cried because I was so angry. I was like, that is so simple. I can't believe that nobody ever showed it to me like this. So it was really eye-opening to see fractions and proportion and all these things. And it's so crazy that we take real physical things and make them abstract and then just try to teach it the abstract way to children. Why do we do that? We should take them back to the beginnings, the origins of how this came about, and show them the origins so they feel like the discoverer of this abstract concept. And they'll say, oh my gosh, we could write this as a formula by doing this. It's been around for a long time, but they got the experience of that discovery. So it is really powerful, and it's a lot of fun being a Montessori teacher and working with these materials all the time. And often, like I taught for years, and a child would point something out or see something I had never noticed before. I mean, they're absolutely brilliant the way they all connect with each other. And you're so lucky to be in an AMI accredited school, because this is the real curriculum that Maria Montessori herself designed, carried on by this organization to hold those original archives and the original way of doing it, because then you get all the connectivity. You know, some Montessori schools, they just take bits and pieces and they lose the power of the connection between all these materials. So you're really, really lucky to be here where you have that. It's really great. Another question?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, in a given year, you can assume that our children are at Montessori less than half of their waking hours. So, but none of us are Montessori trained teachers.
Yes.
So all these great, valuable lessons, how do we do that at home?
Yeah, great question. I tell people, and the last chapter of the book is about this, so taking it home, it's really about the principles and that formula of thinking, okay, I am not forming my child. I'm not able to mold them. They are forming themselves. So they're going to explore the environment and they're going to form themselves. How can I help? And I can prepare the environment. So I can maybe arrange the kitchen in such a way that the child can get to things they need to get to. I can show them how to use these things. I can give them a little demonstration on how to wipe up the mess on their table, or how to do something for themselves, how to dress themselves. I can help them with that and show them. And I can model for them. And I can give them choices, and I can give them boundaries. And I'm going to give just a couple choices, and there are going to be boundaries. And between those, the child is then free in that space to make choices that I know would be good choices, because I put the boundaries there. And that's where that independence develops. But the most important thing at home is love and having it be more relaxed than it is at school in a way. Does that make sense? Because we don't want school to be all day long and all night long at home. They need family to be different, a little different from school in the sense of, you're more relaxed at home. It's different. It's natural. And I only say that because sometimes when people try to make home really perfect in their minds, like the perfect Montessori space, the child is like, or I've seen that material before if my parent got it at home and it just went too far. And so they're not as excited to be at school. School can be different. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
I want to take you back to this for a minute, because remember this picture. Every time we start to ask a question about why why can't we have this, or why don't we do that? Check with yourself. Is this where it's coming from? Because you're thinking school should be like this. Everybody should be the same age, or whatever it is that you're thinking in your mind might be coming just from an ingrained experience you've had, but not from anything that really is logical. So sometimes we snap back to that, and sometimes as teachers we snap back to that too. And we have to stop ourselves and say, but that's not how children learn. They learn like this. So the whole room has to be different. The whole approach has to be different. That's why we call it a revolution in education. It's a revolution in our thinking. We have to keep changing the way we're thinking. But I think this is a really exciting time for Montessori, and I'll just finish with this. I think this is a really exciting time for Montessori because in the world people are realizing we've got to change the way we're thinking, right? Companies are being thrown upside down. The way we view media has changed. The way that we, all of Silicon Valley, I mean, everything in our lives is flipping upside down and turning inside out, and it's different. And it shows you, this is adapting. We're adapting. So we need our school systems too to be adaptable like this. And one of the beauties in Montessori, one of the amazing things that I think makes it so universal and so global is that every culture, every person can individualize Montessori without changing the principles of it, because the principles are adaptable. So there's a Lakota Montessori school where they have been able to take their language, their customs, their way, they've made their own sandpaper symbols and been able to make it a Lakota Montessori school, a Hmong Montessori school, a Mexican Montessori school. I mean, whatever is important to that culture, they can do it. And so Montessori can be for everybody in every kind of space. Do you know what I'm saying? So that I think makes it a beautiful time for Montessori. It's the right answer. The really important thing, and what you'll pick up from the book too, is that we do it the way it's meant to be, because that's the way it works. And if we don't do it that way, we're just going to we're going to get something better than conventional school, I think, but it's not really going to reach its full potential. It's going to reach its full potential when you do it the way you're doing it here at this school with the AMI trained teachers. And the more you support the teachers and the more you support the school just mentally and support your children to go in there day after day and really take advantage of that environment, the more you're going to get out of it. So I hope you really enjoy. Yes?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Sorry for showing up.
It's okay. We understand.
I think a lot of us do see the value in Montessori education.
Yeah.
I'm just curious from your opinion, why hasn't that translated to maybe the public education sphere?
That's
As
the
kids
$1 million question. I know, it's so frustrating. That's why I wrote the book. So you could buy a few copies and give them to people.
Give it to the politicians.
Because there's this potential here with this. And why haven't people? Because there's so much misrepresentation and misunderstanding of what it is. And I would not have spent 6 years writing this book if somebody else would have done it, but nobody was addressing that. Nobody has been addressing the misunderstandings and the misconceptions that are out there so that people could understand this is the potential, this is what can happen. And so that's why, I was writing this book to try to clarify, just to reach people to understand Montessori is amazing. And this is what it really is. And when more people read it, if we can get more people to read it, I think we'll have more people understanding it.